Hello, I'm Adam Smith. I'm a senior writer at Larian Studios working on Baldur's Gate 3.
Hey guys, Gabriel from Serial Killers. We had a Baldur's Gate 3 preview event. We already saw around 2 or 3 hours of the game. So the first big question that comes up, will it be possible for people that haven't played the first 2 games to get into the game, the story, the characters, the lore?
Yeah, hopefully. No, it will. It is a sequel to Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, so we are not just a Forgotten Realms game, we're very specifically a Baldur's Gate game. So what we do is we take the Baalspawn saga, the story of Baldur's Gate 1, 2, Throne of Baal, and those are events that occurred in the world that we're set in. Mm-hmm. So people will remember them. Some people don't. Some people have very clear memories of them. Some people have living memories of them because some races live long enough that it is still within their memory. But we're set 100 years later in 5th edition D&D. So some time has passed. But the Baalspawn saga was dramatic enough that it left scars on the world. So it's not gone away. But in the same way that to play Baldur's Gate 1, you didn't need to know the history of the Forgotten Realms, you didn't need to know the history of the Sword Coast and Baldur's Gate, you didn't need to know who Baal was, you didn't know who the Dead Three were. We're in a very similar situation where we want to tell a story where you're grounded in the world by the writing, by the setting. So if it's completely new to you, then that will be absolutely fine. The same way that if you set a game in France or Germany, you don't need to know the history of the country because we treat it as a living world. So our characters have knowledge of the world. Some of them, Lysel the Githyanki, doesn't have much knowledge of the world, so she's a newcomer to the world of Faerun. But there'll be a lot of treats and surprises for people who do know the original games, and they'll absolutely feel the conclusion of that game is present. But also it is a new story.
Yep. We already saw the Mindflayer in the teaser. Can you give us anything about this creature, this thing, without spoiling too much?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So the Mindflayer is awesome and terrifying. And we really wanted to explore parts of the Forgotten Realms that hadn't been explored as in-depth in previous Baldur's Gate games. So Mindflayers did appear. But we're looking more at the grand history of the Mindflayers and their empire. So the very first shot you see actually in the opening cinematic is a mural that's on board the Nautiloid. And that tells you, it's a mural that tells you the history of the Illithid, and Illithid, the term for Mindflayers. It tells you the history of their empire. And it's a very deliberate thing because we care very deeply about the background of Mindflayers. We're not just treating them as these eldritch monsters. They have, again, a history in not just this one world, but in many worlds. And the story we're telling is going to explore a lot of that. And we're looking at what they're going to do next. That I can't spoil. But they give us a sense of otherworldliness, which I think is very important. The Forgotten Realms is already otherworldly to us. But to the characters that live there, this is their normal life. Their normal life includes dragons and gods, but it doesn't include Mindflayers most of the time. So it injects this element of strangeness and weirdness to our world. And fundamentally what a Mindflayer is it's an alien. It's a thing that travels from different places, places that we hint at, and it breeds by infecting, and yeah, that's as much as I can probably say. Yeah.
So story-wise, or let's go to the writing process. How do you keep up with all the lots of NPCs, side quests, smaller stories? How do you keep track with combining all of the fates or their interactions?
Well, we look at where we want you to go. And we have a very good idea from the beginning of the game where you're going to start and the multiple places you might end up. And then we fill in as we go. So we say, this is a region that has certain qualities to it, certain tones to it, and then we populate it. And what we try to do all the time is 2 things, actually. One is that we try to tie everything back into either a personal story, one of the origin character stories, or your own player character, but also to the wider themes of the game. So the game's about survival initially. It's about being infected and needing to survive, needing to find a healer, and that goes incredibly deep because what you'll discover as you play is that even the creatures and characters you might think of as villains, often they're on a similar path to you. They're looking for ways to survive in a very dangerous world. So that gives us a very good way of exploring different kinds of character. The other thing is that we try to deliberately pace. It's very challenging because we want the player to control the pace to an extent, but we also want to make sure that we aren't just hitting you with one tone over and over again. We don't want to say this is dark fantasy or this is high adventure or this is eldritch horror. It's all of those things, because if you're telling a story as long and as detailed as we are, then you need to be able to shift between tones to maintain interest, for our own interest as well. That makes it more exciting to write. So naturally, like, populating the world, making the world feel believable, not treating it as this kind of cartoon fantasy, but as a place that is real, where people have lived and had experiences. That does a lot of the work for you, because if you approach it in that way, then really you're writing people, and so you think, how would somebody react to this, and then you fill it in, and so getting the level of reactivity and consequence in there is the most interesting part. So that's what we try to look at all the time, is when you journey through this world, what are the things that you do that are going to have serious consequences? What are the things that you do that are going to have minor consequences? And it kind of fills in fairly naturally if you follow those rules. Yeah.
Are there any works or games besides the first previous games that you draw inspiration from or took part from?
Yeah, I mean, like, we draw inspiration from films, comics, novels. Obviously, from Forgotten Realms, we have like decades of writing to look at there, and the way I always look at it is that the more good writing there exists in games, then the more elevated games become, and that's good for all of us. So in terms of specifics, it's going to change depending on which writer you speak to, because we all have different opinions. But most recently, I've already mentioned this to one person today, Disco Elysium. I think it's one of the best games ever written and designed. So you look at these things, and it's not a case of we're a completely different setting to Disco Elysium. Our tone is very different in a lot of places. Our characters, our setting are very different, but just the quality of it, then if you're not inspired by it, then it'd be strange to me. Like, that stuff is just exciting and inspirational. But we have the great advantage as well that we have literal decades of Dungeons and Dragons lore and storytelling that we can draw on. So, like, exploring that and digging into especially the weirder corners of Forgotten Realms, which aren't often explored or explored in ways that we think we can add to that. We can add a different twist to that. That's one of our biggest inspirations as well. We read a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. We play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons as well. And part of it is that, Dungeons and Dragons is a system, but it's also stories. And it's stories that players have made. Those can be inspirational as well. You see someone playing a session of D&D and you can be inspired by that, because what that is collaborative storytelling. It's a DM telling a story and players telling their own story on top of that. So that sense of collaborative storytelling is really important as well. So some of the most inspirational things aren't necessarily individual games, but it's sessions of games. It's people's campaigns. It's the ways people play, and play is storytelling. So yeah.
When you started the writing, did you get in contact with the original developers, or how did you start that journey?
We've spoken a lot to Wizards of the Coast, so the majority of the conversations outside of Larian have been with Wizards of the Coast. So whenever we touch on aspects of lore or we touch on aspects of the previous games, then we talk to them and we make sure that it fits with their vision, and usually they are completely open to us changing things. We will be canonical, just the same way the Ballspawn saga changed Forgotten Realms, we will as well, which is really exciting. It is one of the most exciting things about it, is realizing what we do has consequences outside of our own game. That's really amazing. It's really good fun, and there Sven would be able to answer that better than I would because it would have been early on. But I think there was some members of the original team that he may have spoken to. But we were very clear that we wanted to make a Larian game. And we had a story that we wanted to tell in our own way. And also in terms of rule set, we're working with 5th edition, so we are a long way away. The rule set hasn't changed. Not everything's changed, but 5th edition rules are very different, and the settings moved on as well. So it is very much our game. We don't want to make a game that's beholden to the previous games. We want to make a game that's respectful to them.
Are there any challenges you faced in, because you mentioned several writers? So how does working in a team together, or are there any blockades you had, like when you didn't come forward in the process or something?
No, working with, I think the more people you work with different points of view and different perspectives, the easier it is in a way. There's a lot of conversation. There's a lot of points where it's like, this is an idea that I have, and I'm like, do you think this is a good idea? And you get feedback from really intelligent people, and that's it's always an advantage. And I think that having the size of team that we have, and having the diversity of the team that we have, different points of view, different perspectives, different experiences, that just makes the world richer. I think that collaboration's important to everything that we do. You saw the game today. We have a cinematics team now, so when we're building things, we have to talk to them about it. And we say, what can you do with this scene? How would this look? And it's always a conversation. What that does is it actually makes you a better writer because you're reacting to people. And when you're reacting, you're usually thinking things through a lot more. And you've got other people saying, well, what if you did this? What if this happened? Or I can do this for this scene, and that just gives you more freedom in a sense. It doesn't constrict you, it actually adds to your freedoms. Yeah.
Have you already finished the whole writing process for the game, or are you still in? Okay.
Yeah. we know what our story is, but we don't know every story that's in there. And like anything else in design, I think that it's best when it's reactive. So if we see something that we think, oh, that could be better, or we could add this, or we could do that, then we do it. We try not to lock things down and say this is done. So, there's points where whenever I watch people play, or whenever I show scenes to colleagues, then usually I'll be like, I could make this better, I could do this better. So that level of it, that's always there. One of the most exciting things, actually, one of the coolest things, is showing the scene to somebody and somebody saying, oh, I got to this point, I was like, wouldn't it be cool if I could do this? And you go, well, you can now, I'll do that. And that's always really good fun. But in terms of actually the content, we've got a lot to do. We've got a huge amount already built, we've got a huge amount already written, but a long way to go still. Yeah.
So this final question, is there one piece in the game or one story piece in the game that you really want people to find or explore, or that you can tell us about?
It's kind of all of it. For me, the thing I'm most excited about, probably, there's so much, but I'm writing an origin character who you didn't see today. And I think the moment that origin character is revealed will probably be one of the happiest days of my life. I'm really excited. And, we have a lot of the art coming through now. We're casting voice for it. And yeah, I think, so we have 5 that you saw today, and 5 already in the game, and a lot of the writing for them is done, a lot of the performance is done. But the first time we got mocap and VO back for some of the characters was just like one of those days where you're just like, it's alive, and for the origin it'll be even bigger. It'll just be like, this is my baby, and yeah, that's probably the thing. And the thing is, for the origins, because they are so complex and the way they interact with each other is so complicated, it's going to be people discovering the parts of them that you weren't sure anyone would find. There's parts of the game that very few people will see because of the complexity of the reactivity. So, and I apologize because I did already tell this story to somebody today, but it's just because it's fresh in my mind. But I was writing a scene a few weeks ago, and there was a point when I was writing it where one of our scripters who's doing the behavior for the scene was like, Adam, you know that 7 people are probably going to ever see this scene. I was like, yeah, but they're going to really like it. And that's kind of the coolest part as well. It's writing the really strange corners that people will discover, and they'll realize they've discovered something. You know, it's the difference between telling a story and letting someone discover a story, right? So instead of just throwing large amounts of text and saying, you know, I am telling you a story now, we're saying, come and discover our stories, and those are the really exciting parts. Yeah. And I think for the Origins especially, there's a huge amount of that because there are so many ways that their individual stories can develop. So yeah,
Yeah, it was amazing. Thanks for taking the time.
No, thank you. Yeah.